so thank you. Thank you for having me here. I'm really happy to be here. I'm Canadian, so it's customary. I'll start with an apology. That's how we say hello. I want to apologize to the developer of the project that I'm about to show you. Whoops, this is on auto. Some sneak preview. Apologize for that also, sorry. Bryce, I threw together some really quick conceptual drawings. And just to try to explain better this project, it's not quite finished yet, which is challenging. And they're really crude. So I didn't want it to reflect on Bryce's excellent work as lead developer and working with the designer on this project. But thank you already. Wow. So there they are. So citizen journalism VR, in a nutshell, what the project is. This is problematic. Does anyone know how to turn this off? Slideshow mode? Here, maybe? Just leave it like this. So, elevator pitch, citizen journalism VR. You have these great 360 videos you see journalists producing, New York Times, Al Jazeera, you name it. They're creating this great documentation of moments in time, but really what do you do with them? And you're not really framing a story anymore. You're providing, as the first keynote said, stories tellings. You're giving the audience these options to create their own stories out of it. And so what this is a concept. It's not a finished product yet with any kind of research or evaluation outcomes in mind, but it's a concept of bringing in something like a smartphone into those and having the user document and do their own journalism from within that journalism. So the project is a partnership between MacArthur Foundation, who gave us a grant to make this concept into a prototype, and they awarded that to VGA Gallery in Chicago, and they had partnered with me in talking through this concept. I'm with the Media Majlis, which is a museum of journalism, media, and communications, which we've just opened up in Qatar in Northwestern University, in the campus there. So quickly, VGA Gallery, a beautiful space if you haven't been, in Chicago. They curate exhibitions around art and video games. It's a wonderful and very busy, interesting space. They were founded in 2013. They've got numerous articles and contributions to some pretty noteworthy and prestigious publications. They've served, and I think this is still accurate, correct me if I'm wrong, Bryce, served approximately 25,000 individuals last year. Cool. Media Majlis, this is what we just opened in Doha. Is a very technically dense room, exhibition space, about 150 screens. 50 of those are interactive. And we produce exhibitions on themes around media, communications, and journalism, tied into the curriculum in Northwestern, at Northwestern School of Journalism in Qatar. So we're the first of its kind in the region, and we do everything in both languages, and the idea is to give people journalistic tools or concepts on journalism, communications, and media within the space in an informal way. So this concept of citizen journalism VR was first conceived of, there's a wonderful journalist named Julia Lieb. If you don't know her work, please look it up. She's a freelance journalist that puts herself into areas of conflict such as Congo, Sudan, Uganda. She goes there by herself. She goes places where other people haven't been, and she documents these places often in 360 to produce VR documentary films and experiences. So she came and talked to us, and the question was begged, like, how do we get our students into those areas, I guess virtually, and when they're there, what are they going to do with it? So the idea was to be able to go into those places Julia had been and somehow engage and personalize that experience, engage with and personalize that experience. So I'm sure most people, it's probably come up several times in this conference, is that limitation of 360. It's missing something. It's missing that layer of interactivity. This is a way to introduce it. So the idea to create virtual tools for people, once they're immersed into those 360 worlds, whether it be to capture a photo or a video from within that 360 world, or some type of documentation, and then be able to output it outside of that world. This way the students could do their own journalistic reporting from within those 360 videos and export for evaluation the results. So the approved project that MacArthur Foundation ended up awarding was this concept, more of an art game, that we would gamify the notion of creating the journalism from within the 360 world and produce it in 2 exhibitions. One at VGA and other areas in Chicago, and one exhibition at the Media Majlis in Qatar. So those are upcoming in September. As I mentioned, the prototype is still in development, but we'll be presenting it and launching in August and September. And then we'll report on the results, and then we'll take it from there. So I'm really interested in conversations once I've shown you a little bit how it works, on what we can do with this tool after, what are some of the ways we can evaluate it, and what are the applications for it. And as I mentioned, it was made possible with the MacArthur Foundation funding. So we are at a moment in time in this project where we have the content chosen, which is exciting, which is why I wanted to mock these things up quickly. So this is Julia Lieb's 360 exclusive footage. This is from a female rebel fighter in Congo. She's in a cooking hut. You can see there's a lot of detail, a lot of imagery. This is obviously the flattened, stitched together video. And she's telling her story, which is quite powerful and emotional, and you're there listening to her. But what? What do you do with that? If you're listening to her, you're focused on her. You need to be able to take it away. This is the apology to Bryce. Sorry for the crude smartphone. But what's really interesting in this project is the difference between this and this. So how does that make you feel? How does that make you feel about the content or engage with the content differently? And it is quite different. But the problem, again, this point of interest, this woman sitting in the middle, there's a lot going on around her that you'll probably miss when this is your focal point. So you may miss the child sitting next to her. So by bringing in the smartphone or the virtual smartphone, it'll allow us to objectively measure how people are interacting with the content, what they choose to look at, what they don't choose to look at, which is an interesting space for measuring things like bias or composition or the objective reporting on situations. The second piece of content that we're going to be working with, is soon to be licensed, is the Fight for Fallujah clip from the New York Times. So these 2 pieces will sit within the CJVR, and the user will go from one place to the next, documenting and creating their journalistic perspective. So, some possible user evaluations, some outcomes that we're going to look at after this launches at Northwestern or after the exhibition at VGA, is understanding how people, or looking at how people understand the content differently when viewing 360 video through the lens of a virtual smartphone. Do they enjoy it more or less? Does it make a difference? And do you feel more or less emotionally connected to content when you're looking at something through your device virtually, which is interesting. And potential applications at Northwestern, as far as our educational outcomes, the objective evaluation of documentation is a really important and interesting application for this. So journalism professors being able to measure the quality and accuracy from within these controlled environments and objectively measuring it against reportage from another journalist. Analysis of bias is also very easily done. What did you ignore? What did you focus on? And awareness of those choices and raising that awareness in our students is really important. Another interesting potential application would be the documentation of live 360 experiences as well. So how do you report on those events happening only within a virtual world and then explain them to the outside world? That's it. Thank you.
Next, please join me in welcoming Karina Popp, freelance designer and instructor whose work has been featured in Come Out and Play, Fantastic Arcade, and Sesame Workshop. Karina's talk is Game Changed, a Postmortem.
And two talks that inspired me for this. For one, Palette Racing's Making Games in a Fucked Up World is a great talk in general, but sort of that core thesis of discarding the notion that like games that engage with like social betterment themes need to have some sort of evaluative, provable outcome at the end. So that's sort of like underlining most of the things I'm going to say today. And then the other talk is Colleen Macklin's 2016 GDC talk, Games for Change, Turn to Face the Strange, which also really great, free to watch online, and you should. Talks a lot about the diversity of social impact games and what gets funding versus what doesn't, and sort of what the future of funding games for change could look like. For me today, that talk is super important because it's because of this talk that I was able to make the game I'm going to talk about today. Sort of a central gimmick to Macklin's talk is a real-time impromptu game design competition. Macklin asked the audience to come up with a game for change while she gave her talk, emailing a pitch to a set of judges who would pick their favorite 3 games. The winner of the competition, chosen from those top 3 by applause, would get several cups of change that Macklin collected from the audience over the course of the talk. And so this is the game that I sent in. It's called the Change Game. Very clever. So the materials that you need for this game are a cup or several cups of change. I think in this case it was like 5 or 6. It was a lot. You need walking shoes and probably water. Also probably friends to go with you to play this game. The rules are that you need to walk from the Moscone Center in San Francisco to Golden Gate Park with your cups of change. You cannot count your change. You're not allowed to know how much change you have. And during your walk, whenever someone asks you for money, you must give them some amount of money. You can't accept anything in exchange for that money. position is if you reach Golden Gate Park with some amount of change remaining. This is the game that I sent in, and then I did win the Cups of Change. If you can't tell, I'm very nervous on stage, so I was nervous in this situation, and then I also had to be responsible for like all of this change. So I ran away as fast as I possibly could. I was anxious and nervous when I sent it in, because this sort of idea of how we interact with change in the real world is something I think about, especially in San Francisco. And now I was nervous because I actually had to play this game. I'm going to rip on San Francisco for a second, but I do want to acknowledge that New York City is like the home of like American socioeconomic stratification. It's like the highest homelessness rate in the country. We have giant buildings named after robber barons and whatnot. It's crazy. But for some reason, when I'm in San Francisco, socioeconomic stratification occupies like 90% of my thoughts. I think if I had to guess sort of where this comes from, it's because I've been to San Francisco 3 times, every time for GDC. And the Moscone Center, where GDC takes place, is like this gleaming techno-chromium future fever dream, where everybody's really excited about games or whatever. And then famously, a few blocks away is the Tenderloin, which is, frequently characterized as a slum of some sort, not personally my view, but there's a way of talking about the difference between the area that we have GDC at the Moscone Center and the Tenderloin. It sort of troubles me. And I feel really frustrated at GDC by my complicity and my uselessness in sort of causing this dichotomy. So the change game, the game that I sent in during Colleen Macklin's talk, comes from my very, very selfish preoccupation with what I can and mostly cannot do with this frustration when I'm at GDC. So here are the rules again, just to remind you. I played the game that weekend. It took around 3 hours. I did bring a couple of friends with me. We did stop periodically for water. We had lunch at one point. And we took a bit of a scenic route from the Moscone Center through the Tenderloin and a little bit of Union Square. And I have some very, very unscientific data from my journey. For one, I have this chart of the change over time. You can see it around 9:30, there was a peak. This is when my friend changed his shoes. He initially was wearing boots and realized, no, I need to switch to my sneakers. The amount of change, 90% of the change was how much money I had at the beginning versus what I had at the end, and then again, my friend who changed his shoes. Beyond these basic non-facts, the moments that stuck out to me most from playing this game kind of varied. If you watch the talk, there's a point where like Colleen Macklin gets distracted because at the top of one of the cups is a $20 bill, and she's like, oh wow, a $20 bill. Early in our journey, somewhere around Union Square, there was an elderly man with a cardboard sign asking for money. That's who I gave the $20 bill to. Later, past the Tenderloin, and just before we arrived in the wealthier residential areas of San Francisco, there was a woman sitting outside a gas station with a soda cup, and I very nearly put $1 in it before realizing there was indeed soda in the cup, mirroring this moment from Kentucky Route Zero, if you're familiar with it, which was one of the most, eye-opening moments for me of how ridiculous and selfish my middle-class impotent guilt was, that I sort of would see homeless people and sort of think about what I can give them instead of realizing there's people existing in a space. There's also a cat on High Ashbury who I saw the cat had a cup, and I was like, I'm gonna give the cat some money. But apparently I was supposed to take a picture with the cat. The cat's humans were alarmed, like, no, take a picture, post it on Instagram, and then I had to say, no, I can't. It's against the rules. I can't accept your cat's picture in exchange for this money. Finally, we ended up outside of the Bison Pavilion in Golden Gate Park. It's like, I don't know, 3/4 of the way through the park. And we just sat on this bench and watched the bison graze in the distance. As I looked at the bison, and in the years since playing the change game, I've meditated a lot on how ridiculous and silly it was to distribute the money, and that sort of with futility of my own individual railing against the machine of an industry I choose to work in and near. I thought about the people in Colleen Macklin's talk, the audience, who put their change into those cups, so eager and trusting in her words and purpose, and how I wish we could kind of extend that mentality and that contract to sort of a larger societal context more readily. Like a worry stone, I would return to these few hours of play, turning the experience over and over in my mind. If someone else was to play the change game, maybe they would have different thoughts. I will never know, and I really, really hope I never do know. As I said at the top of my time with you, I don't think anyone else should play this game. For one, I have no idea where you would get enough change to play it. And two, I do think this game is very unethical. There are these people who are just going about their lives, and I'm walking in there and sort of making them into unconsenting players, unconsenting subjects of study, and that's messed up. But in retrospect, maybe this whole talk was just me justifying why I should play this very questionable game to begin with. But I do want to say that I think there's value in games that can only be played by one person once, or never. In games which have no clear, provable point to them. Games with no rigorous design, no rigorous systems thinking, no authored narrative, nothing like some sort of like non-fiction biography or perspective meant to cause the player to empathize with someone. Honestly, beyond what I've stated today, the change game doesn't have a thesis to it. There isn't a point. I'd like to think of this kind of game as a confluence between games such as Brendan Ramirez's Train, which does have a thesis and does have a point, but you can really only ever play it once because of its central twist. And then something more nebulous, like a Fluxus game that maybe is unplayable and it's just kind of a mess of different ideas. I wish there were more of these kinds of meditative, just slightly structured experiences, not based in something provable, but in something as nebulous and irrational as human reaction. Experiences that are singular and messy and ask us to untangle them for their own sake. An experience only you can play and only you can bring purpose to, that doesn't give you a purpose outright. It's been 3 years since I played the change game. Over that time, I desperately wanted to talk about it. I wanted to talk about my experience, but I didn't know how to. I've written and rewritten this talk so many times, trying to get it right, trying to hit the perfect tone, find the right, arguments, share the details I felt were worth sharing. And even now I'm standing here and I'm like, oh no, I screwed it up. I don't even know if talking about it today was the right thing to do. I hope it was the right thing to do. But I'll probably never know for sure. And I think that not knowing is okay too. Thank you.
Next up is Anna Feigenbaum, Senior Lecturer in Digital Storytelling at Bournemouth University. Anna is here to discuss her takeaways from developing Riot ID, the board game.
So many of us have seen images that look like this many times before in the news. This one is from Hong Kong, where we have ongoing protests primarily of young people who are being met with a lot of police force. And so the last 5 years I've been working with a group of NGOs and activists, street medics, journalists, doing a project called Riot ID that tracks and monitors and helps people identify the use of force using police weapons against primarily peaceful protesters. So naturally, when you do this kind of work, you think, I bet I should really make a board game out of this, because that would be super fun. So that is how Riot ID was born, and I'll talk about this game in a moment. So these are our sponsors, and just to start by saying that this was possible with an Education for Justice grant from the UNODC, and now we have support from Bournemouth University. So just to give you like a brief as a game with a target age of 16 to 18. So we had a kind of daunting task ahead of us. So what I'm going to talk about today is how our team worked together in order to try and playtest this game. This is our team, and importantly, just a note here that the team was comprised from its very origin. Everything in this game, from its inception through its playtest to its development, was done with graphic designers, game designers, our NGO partners, and our researchers. And so we do a kind of co-design, co-creation process through all of the material that we make. So we've got a little takeaway for you of our top 10 tips for game designing for social justice, so please take one at the end. And I'm going to talk just about a few of those tips in the presentation here today. So one of the things that was really important for this project was that we brought together diverse playtest groups. We wanted in as many of the playtests as possible to actually have our journalists, our game designers, our NGOs, our street medics, so that whether or not people were familiar with gameplay, whether they were Monopoly players or Agricola players, they all were able to share that knowledge in the room together. We wanted people to bring their individual expertise, and we wanted people to ask dumb questions. We wanted to know dumb game questions. What is an action? What does it mean, take 4 actions? Things that we would have assumed as avid game players that everybody knows what it means, but of course they don't. And likewise, we wanted dumb questions from game designers who've never been involved in a protest, like what is a tear gas canister? And so those are the things that really got us to the place where we needed to know what to do to scale a game to our target audience. So one of the other things that we did in terms of thinking about diversity in playtesting was not just to playtest with diverse groups, but also to playtest in diverse spaces. So this is just an image from a playtest we did with a bunch of teachers, international teachers that come together at a residential for our EDP, our Doctorate in Education at my home university of Bournemouth. And this is us playtesting the game at a game board cafe up in Manchester with our kind of target audience group, who are the child and one of the people in the NGO, which is how we had access to them, just to be transparent there, and her friends. And one of the things that we found really difficult or challenging in this project, like for any of these kinds of games for change projects that are educationally minded, is that you keep wanting to make the game really cool, but you have to stick to that educational story. And that is such a challenge as you're trying to make the game fun. Every single time you want to introduce a fun mechanic, you have to go back to that educational story. And when your educational story is monitoring, recording, and identifying police use of force abuses with riot control weapons, that can be quite a challenge. And so we really had to keeping our game designers' egos in check. They kept wanting to make a much more exciting, much more fun, much more repeatably playable game than we actually could. Because the reality of this game is that you're probably going to play it once in your social studies class or at your Model UN, and it doesn't really need to be repeat played. It needs to get that story across as much as possible. And so that challenge of how we can get game mechanics to make the game engaging enough that people actually could want to play it, but without losing that story, meant that we needed to change the way that we were thinking, from thinking about playing a game to thinking about making something that was more interesting than what it's like to read aloud the UN Basic Principles of Use of Force monitoring, which looks like this, which is generally how this would be otherwise taught. And so moving away from let's try to win a creative award for best board game of the year to let's try to make something more interesting than this really helped our team kind of change the way that it was thinking about what its task was. And one of the ways, and this is a traditional answer to this problem, one of the ways that we did that was to use what we call incident cards to put the kind of narrative elements of the game into play. So every time you move across the board, an incident happens, you have to pick up a card, and then your team has to immediately respond to the incident. All of the incidents are collaborative and can affect any player at any time on the board. And so this is where we tried to dramatize the very exciting things that happen in the lives of human rights monitors. My favorite one is when the internet goes out and all of the players have to return to base and lose a turn. So these kinds of things became as dramatized as possible and kind of entered into the gameplay that way. And we also put a lot of things into lesson plans that we thought were too dry to put into the game itself, and really always thinking about that when we're making an educational game, we're also making all of the resources that surround it, and so how do you get the right elements of the narrative into the game and then find other places for the other bits of narrative. So in terms of the visual design of the game, we spent a lot And so we ended up with a kind of a lot of kind of shadow and transparency work, so that we have the kind of silhouettes of figures without figures that were too kind of clear, but at the same time that carry a bit of heaviness to them, or a bit of kind of emotive response. And so we're not sure if we got it exactly right, but this is where we sort of ended on in terms of trying to figure out how to illustrate this. All of our case files, so the cases that you as a team are trying to solve, are based on anonymized Amnesty International reports of real life situations that have happened during protests, and you're collecting the evidence of the incidents that occurred during that protest. So just to wrap up, and the reason that at least I, as a non-game designer, came to create this game with my brother, thankfully, is a game designer, so he worked on the project, as well as lots of other alumni from NYU's Game Center, so it's called, which was amazing, and this wouldn't have happened without their time in exchange for pizza. They were allowed to exchange things. So really just keeping at the heart of this that we were doing a social justice project, and we never wanted to lose that impetus. Like, that is what brought us here, that is why we do this work. And so everything that we did around the game and around the way that it's going to be created, disseminated, and played really kept that message at its heart. And so just to kind of an example of that, this is the game. If anyone wants to flip through it later. Everything is downloadable, printable, and easy to translate into various languages. So this is one that our designers hand put all of these together. It takes 6 hours, so we don't necessarily recommend it for busy teachers. But if you want to make it pretty, it is possible. And we will also have ones that you can order. But everything is made out of printable paper on a standard kind of school printer, and it can be contained in our little file. And that's something that is really at the heart of our project, is making everything DIY translatable and everything kind of open sourced and reproducible in that way. So this is not a project that is about trying to make money or create sort of, we have massive IP debates about this, but really, if you're trying to create a project for social justice, that has to be in the infrastructure of every part of the game, from its visuals to its distribution methods. Okay. Thank you very much. And the game will be by next month available on our website, which is called Riot ID, and you can download it. And this is me, and this is Alex, who worked on the game, who's also at the event. So thank you.
And then finally, we have Karen Schrier, Associate Professor and Director of Games at Marist College. Karen is here to talk about how to use game jams to discuss perspective training and empathy.
Hello. I'm really hoping that those timings don't kind of show up and that little gremlins come in and it just keeps going. Okay, good. All right. So, hi. I love being at Games for Change. Are you loving it? This is my favorite conference of all time. I've been going like 15 years. So, I'm super thrilled to be here and to be speaking with you about some amazing research that I've been doing this past year as a fellow, a Belfer Fellow with the ADL's Center for Technology and Society, an awesome, amazing fellowship that I hope you all apply for. It's so great, and I got to be in its inaugural class and do some amazing things. And so, there it is, ADL, okay. All right, so for the past 15 years, I have been grappling with these questions of how we can use games to support empathy, to think through ethical problems, to try to understand how we can solve real-world problems, to understand ourselves better, and even to think about how we can reduce bias. So I've been really kind of grappling with those questions, and through this fellowship, I got to grapple with another question, which is, can we also use the process of making games to also do those things? So can we understand other perspectives through making games about all different kinds of people and about ourselves? So and all sorts of cool stuff. We also had diversifiers at the game jam, so people could make a game about identity, but then they also had some other options like secret identity, make a game about identity that's not been well represented in games. So we really tried to get people to have fun, think through identity, and to make a game about it. All right, so we ended up doing a just this past October, and it was 9 locations, 13 hours, and we had over 100 game jam participants. 25 games were created, and we also did something extra to this, which we actually researched the game jam to see if it was effective in terms of supporting, first of all, fun, supporting identity exploration. Are people really grappling with their own identities and other people's identities? Are they taking on other people's perspectives? Are they empathizing? We really looked into this. Can you hear me, by the way?
Yeah.
All right. All right, so what we did was we split, this is kind of interesting, we put them into 3 different conditions, okay? So some people just did the game jam. They just, normal game jam, they made a game about identity, that's it. Some people, third of the people, also got the game jam guide. All right, so we gave them this like cool little funky colorful guide. Here's some tips, here's some hints. It had things like exercises in it. Actually, let me just show you. I have some sample pages from it. It had things like little identity exercises. So things like they could, one of the exercises was the game developer bag. So like pick out something from your bag that means something to you, talk about it. See if you can make a game out of the different objects that are in your bags. You know, just trying to give them some brainstorming exercises that they could do to use to make games, right? So that was the second condition. Then we had a third condition, and this was really interesting, okay? So these folks were doing the jam, they're jamming, they got the guide, but then they also got an actual person, like a real guide, like a person who is an anti-bias educator, who could be on their team and be part and participating in the game jam process. So they were part of it. They were throughout the whole thing, guiding them, supporting the exercises, getting them to really think about bias and to think about, oh, maybe we shouldn't put this, maybe we should represent this identity in this way because it's very, stereotypical. Really had them kind of think through those kinds of questions. Okay, so today I'm only giving you a little taste. What's awesome though is that all of the results are in this report that came out last night. All right, so I'm just like I've been watching Top Chef, so it's like a little amuse-bouche, right, of the results. But this is free, it's online. That's the URL right there. You can download it and you can read it, and it's chock full of research, all about empathy, all about using games to support bias reduction, and then it talks about the results of this particular research. But let me just tell you a few things. One is that, which is pretty awesome, they had fun. They actually had, we gave them a survey before and after the jam. They had more fun after. So that's good. They're having fun. They felt like the event was inclusive, that the actual event, the participation, was representing that kind of perspective-taking environment where you're caring and compassionate about each other and you're working as a team and having fun. So that's awesome. Another thing that we found, which was really great, is that negative things, but actually through making a game that supported, positive pro-social types of outcomes, they started to believe that games were less likely to cause violence. All right, so we found that the participants in this were really feeling more safe and secure after the game than before, which is kind of like, you may not realize, like, well, how does that have to do with empathy? But like, think about like when you're on a plane, they always say like, you gotta put that thing on your face before because you can't help other people if you don't help yourself first. You have to feel safe and secure yourself to be able to reach out and give to others. So it's important that they felt more comfortable with themselves and who they are in their environment, and that supported that, that kind of first step towards empathic action. Okay. So that's those are all the good news. The less, thrilling news is that we didn't find a change in terms of perspective taking and empathic concern. And the question is, maybe if we had done it longer, it was only 13 hours. Also, only 38% of the games directly focused on empathy. Some of them were like secret identity games or like spy games. Not as much about empathy, right? So the question is, if we had more participants, would we have found a change? I don't know. It's a question going forward that I hope that you will continue to grapple with. Another interesting finding that we had was that there were like 88% of the people that were there were just like really thrilled with the identity theme. And they were like, this is awesome. But then there were like these 12% of people who were like, I'm not so into this. I'm really resistant to doing things about bias. That's like for other people to do. Oh, like, social justice, blah, blah, blah. So there were some resistance, right? So the question is, how do we reach that population of people who are resistant to wanting to grow, to wanting to take on other people's perspectives, to wanting to be empathetic to others and compassionate, right? So the question is, could game jams be one way? Could we, making games about these issues, could that be one way to start to break down the resistance? And the hope is that going forward, the next step that we're going to do is we're going to try to create anti-bias interventions that are at game studios or possibly in classrooms that are incorporating game design into it. Because perhaps